Hi, my name is Willie, and today we're going to go over this Pushmower from 1971. There's the first two numbers of the code is 1971, and it appears to be all original. So far, all I've done off camera is check the oil, replace the diaphragm on the carburetor, which is pretty easy to do. That's just splitting the carburetor in two pieces, clean all the junk out of it, and replacing the diaphragm in there. Putting a new one in, and lubing up the throttle cable, which I suggest fluid film for lubing up that throttle cable because it doesn't evaporate like a light oil would, or W40. W40 you'd have to keep applying it because it would evaporate. And this thing did run. I had a video, my last video was showing this thing running. At this point in time, it is time to go over this thing and service it because I have a friend that needs one. And these things are always lying around just about anywhere. Look under a rock, I'm sure there's one somewhere that's probably not in too bad a shape. Anyway, I already ran this off camera to warm it up and thin out the oil a little bit. And before I go change the oil on this, I want to drain this gas tank, which is not too difficult on these. We'll get ourselves a drain bucket, set about right there, and we'll dump out that gas. Not too difficult. Just, I got my tools down on the ground on the side. Now, one thing I want to let you guys know about is this is a decent used air filter I had. What I did is, this one's not too brittle. I poured some oil on top of it here. Make sure you have your spacer for your air filter so when you screw down the top it doesn't crush it. And you also want to make sure you're not missing any pieces on the carburetor. This is actually missing the rubber bushing that goes between the carburetor and the air filter cover. I'll see if I can't show you guys that right here. This little bushing sits on here and it clips on top of this carburetor right there. I had enough spare parts. I had one on hand. I could put that on. And I'm not sure how good you're going to see that. Let me grab another carburetor and I'll show you the choke you want to make sure is free. Just give me a second. Here's a later year carburetor off a 3.5 horse. There's a little choke plate in here and it's hooked up to a diaphragm. When you take your air filter off, you want to make sure you have some movement in that choke. It should reset after you let off of that. If it's not opening easy or if it's not closing after you let go of it, you're going to want to replace the diaphragm. The diaphragm was actually stiff, so it wouldn't close all the way, so the choke would not work correctly. And so long as it's moving nice and free like this one is, you know your gasket is in good shape. And another reason you can tell this is for a 3.5 horse is because the bolt pattern is a little bit different, or screw pattern. It also has this flange on top. You don't need that gasket on this one. It also has an extra spring over here to close that choke on the higher horsepower engines, so that's why that one's a little bit different. So we know our carburetor's out of gas. Now let me show you guys where the drain plug is at. There is a drain plug on these engines, and it's a good idea to change oil once a year. Right here is a drain plug. So what I'm going to do so I don't make as big of a mess is I'm going to take this blade off first, so that's out of my way. And this has an adapter on it for a certain size blade. Make sure your blade's not bent while you're under here. This one's actually pretty straight. It's not a high lift, but considering this is just 3 horsepower, we don't need a lot of lift on this. So let me grab the tools and get that all straightened out and get set up. See if that's a 9/16 or not. Set these parts on the side. hopefully I can get this thing under here without making a huge mess. There we go. I'll let that do its thing. When the oil is hot, it drains a lot faster. And with that blade out of the way, I can drop that shaft right in the middle of that drain pan. Being up on a table, I can see if it's draining or not. There it is. Now the drain plug is towards this side of the sump, so I'm going to pick up the opposite side. Just encourage it to drain a little bit faster. They don't hold a lot of oil. Maybe about a half a quart. See, there we have it. Try not to dump it on the ground. It's not the nicest looking oil in the world. But some oil is better than no oil. Now I'm going to take my impact, and this is a 8-point socket for the square head, by the way. If you don't have a 8-point or a 4-point, you can use a, I believe a 7/16 open end would work. Nope, not a 7/16, it's going to be a 1/2 inch. Yep, the box end or the open end of a combination 1/2 inch wrench fits those drain plugs pretty nicely. But the 8-points make that job a whole lot easier. Let me get this turned around and I'll grab a funnel and we'll top her off with some oil. And like I mentioned earlier, put some oil in your air filters as well while you're at this point. You have the oil. I had to find the funnel because it was missing. Not sure how well this one's going to fit in here. Now this one has the cap right down the bottom of the block with a small muffler. Some of the engines with the bigger mufflers will have a taller dipstick tube. You can fill it up with from there, and they have a dipstick on. You don't want to overfill those because then they'll smoke and spit it out the air filter and all that fun stuff. Trying to clean the dust out of here. Oh, by the way, as for what oil I'm using, I am using the AMSOIL small engine oil, which is a 1030. It is more than good enough for these engines. And it's also a low detergent, if not non-detergent. I'm not 100% sure on that, but it's designed for the engines that don't have oil filters on them. Like this one. This does not have an oil filter on it. And if you really care about these engines, if they've been sitting or if you just got one recently, it is recommended that you take the sumps off, which on a Pushmower is not easy because you usually have to clean a lot of rust off the crankshaft, and clean the sump out. At the same time, it's just a Pushmower. It's not a space shuttle. As long as you change your oil regularly, it's not a big deal if there's some sludge in there. It'll work its way out if you change your oil more often, especially after you run it and get it hot. I'm going to say that's good. And yep, took about a 1/2 quart. And I'm sure I had a cap around here somewhere. There it is. This one's missing the gasket, but that's not going to screw anything up on it. It'll still seal. If anything, that's just some anti-corrosion preventative maintenance. So I'll put the air filter back on. Like I said, I did put some oil on top of this foam element. So should be good. Stick that on. I'm gonna go grab some gas. I'll be right back. Turn this around for you guys so you can see what's going on. At least try to. I like these cans because they have a nice long spout on them with a vent cap. You gotta be a little careful when you're using these, but they're a lot more practical from one unit to another as we're filling them up. Something else that also goes missing on a lot of these is the gaskets in the caps. This actually still has the original gasket with the O-ring and the 2 holes. A lot of the new ones are just a piece of cardboard with 4 holes. This still has the original cap on it. A little banged up, but still works. I already know the life this thing had was underneath a lot of pine trees back when it was new. So the pine trees have a lot of low-hanging branches and it likes to beat stuff up. So we got oil in it, we got gas in it. I'm not going to mess with the spark plug. It's already got electronic ignition on it, so I know that's all in good shape. One thing I'm also going to do is I'm going to grab some spray lube up all 4 of the wheels, and make sure they're all happy because they probably never saw oil. At least they've never seen oil in the last few years that hasn't been used. Probably the last 10 years. I'm using fluid film again. Good stuff. Stays put. Okay, I'm gonna set this down on the ground and get you guys set up so we can see it go for a test run. Hang on. Now I forgot to show putting the blade on, but that's pretty simple. Now I got a tip for you guys with these engines, with the auto choke carburetors, is these carburetors have a diaphragm that pumps the fuel up from the bottom of this tank through here, through a straw, and into this essentially a bowl where all the fuel sits. If you have any pinholes down the bottom of that bowl, you're never going to be able to start them very well because the fuel will just drip right back into the tank. Now, once the fuel is in this bowl, it'll be pulled up through the jet into the actual carburetor and then into the intake manifold and run the engine. You also have a cavity over here for your diaphragm fuel pump where there's a spring with a for your diaphragm to pump the fuel. Now, the reason I'm going over this quick as to how it kind of works is there's a way to prime this carburetor without having to rip on that rope 10, 15, 20 times. If you notice, there's slots here and here for the excess to spill back down. So as this fills up, the excess fuel will drip right back down into the tank through these slots. One thing you can do with these is shake that engine back and forth with a full tank of gas, and that gas is going to come up through these slots into the bowl and prime your carburetor. So that's what I'm going to do here, is run this back and forth a few times. That's going to slosh that fuel in there and prime that carburetor. Some of it's actually coming out the lid a little bit, but I'm not too concerned with that. So our throttle's on. This has an auto choke on it. This thing should fire up with 1 or 2 pulls. 1, 2, so not 2 pulls. let's make sure it's going to start up when it's hot. Now, if it doesn't want to start when it's hot, like it's chugging but not wanting to rev up, there's a tuning screw in the front of the carburetor. You turn that in to lean it out and out to richen it. The choke always closes, so if it's flooding out and not wanting to start when it's hot, you're going to have to lean out the fuel mixture a little bit. If you like the video, make sure you give me a thumbs up, and as always, thanks for watching. Have a good day, and bye.